below us, drifting, falling, floating, weightless, coming for earth below us, drifting, falling, floating, weightless, coming for. All right. Welcome to the Revolutionary Blackout Network Monthly Roundtable. I am one of your hosts, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. Just to let you guys know, every single month we do the RBN Roundtable. We also sometimes have a guest with us as well. So good to see all of you joining us here for this beautiful first roundtable, especially for the brand new year of 2025. Good to see all my family and friends that are on the screen right now. Good to see you. I just want to say a big hello and finally get to meet Dr. Charisse Burdens. Good to see you. Sorry.
Charisse burden-stelly. It's all good. CBS is fine. It's a mouthful. Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you. Sabby, Nick, good to see you, my brother and sister.
What's poppin'? What a great sight. Be here with my beautiful brothers and sisters to begin the new year. I'm so excited for this because we just had our cross network live stream on Tuesday, our New Year live stream with DD Geopolitics and Garland Nixon. So it's great to see my brothers and sisters in the RBN network, Dr. CBS. We got post duopoly tomorrow as well. So it's great to be back, isn't it? 2025 is going to be crazy. And 2025 is going to be the year of false flags. We get to talk about that later. What's poppin', Sabby?
What's going on, guys? Yeah, 2025 has already started off kind of crazy. So
yeah, absolutely. So just to let you guys know, if you guys have not already, go ahead and give a like to the stream. This helps us out very much. Thank you so very much to all of you who have supported the channel so far. Also, if you'd like to, you guys can join our mailing list at revolutionaryblackout.outlook.com. I'm sorry, revolutionaryblackout@substack.com. So if you guys want to get those email notifications whenever we go live, and if you guys would like to give us an email, submit any stories or some encouraging words, you guys can go to revolutionaryblackout@outlook.com. So thank you so very much for that there as well. Just as, of course, whenever we have a guest, I would like to be very respectful of their time. So a blanket hello to everybody who's joining us today. It is going to be a very good day, especially for us. And one of the things, just really quick before we get started, I just wanted to also say, this is my first time meeting Dr. CBS. So it is such a pleasure to finally meet you. Yeah, it's crazy. Like we've always missed each other for some reason. So it is nice to have you. And as far as, Dr. CBS, if you guys would like to, she also does great work on the ground. And I just want to share my screen for Dr. CBS. So if you guys would like to, you guys can actually follow her work. This is right here. Associate Professor of African American Studies at Wayne State University. So if you guys would like to get some classes, learn some things, then you guys can also go ahead and look up Dr. CBS as well. She's also on Twitter too. So thank you so very much. It is a pleasure and an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. And as you all stated, 2025 has started out with a bang, literally. So, I'm glad to be here and glad to be with comrades and talking about these issues from a radical Black perspective.
Yep, absolutely. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, let's get into some of the topics that we're going to be discussing. This is our thumbnail for today. Of course, we all just mentioned that Dr. CBS is joining us. We're going to be talking about later in the show about the attack that happened in New Orleans. We actually have the perpetrator that's right there in the thumbnail. So we're going to be talking about that. Then we're going to be talking about the NYPD chief that was just fired. And who is that woman that is next to him? It's going to be really interesting tidbit of information that I want to get into with her because she belongs to a very influential family. And on top of that, we're also going to be talking about homelessness spiking in 2024. What is that going to mean for the unhoused or further people who are struggling in 2025? So this is going to be an interesting and powerful show that we're going to be doing. So we can get into it right now. So the NYPD. What are some factoids that you guys know about the NYPD? Nick, I know you're one of the co-founders of 10 Demands, and you have studied policing quite a bit. Is there any factoids about the NYPD that you can just pull out right now? Because I have like one that I know that's very big, but I know you. I wanted to do the story because I wanted to do it with you. Because you kind of remind me of that, with that dude who's behind the tree and he got on the yellow jacket and he's like, that's what I'm thinking about the story.
I would love to talk to Dr. CBS and get her thoughts on the state of the Black community, the state of things. The police state is the sign of things being dire. Like the NYPD is waging war on their own community. Do you guys know, because there's a lot of talk about North Korea being this crazy militarized state. You guys know the NYPD budget is 3 times larger than the North Korean military budget. So the question I have is, why are we going to war with our own people? A simple, it's not even a factoid, but people look at the NYPD and LAPD wrong. They're not an agent of public service. They are literally gangs. Like they often take bribes. They often harass people of color. They are part of the system of civil asset forfeiture that robs us of our wealth. But despite the record amount of spending, I'll pass it back to Jaybe and Dr. CBS because I could rant on this all day. But despite the massive amount of spending we spend on policing in New York that rivals other countries' military spending, Americans often say, especially New Yorkers say in polls, they still don't feel safe. So where's the money going? The Supreme Court and our society has made it clear that the police job is not to protect you. They're not the subway to reduce crime. We've seen someone who was lit on fire despite the fact that Eric Adams militarized the subway systems. So there's something that a lot of people have a hard time coming to terms with. And I'll pass it to the panel at this thought, that the same way with the border, the same way with immigration, there is no neoliberal solution towards crime. Because despite the fact how much we spend on police, you still have people who say they feel unsafe. You have people who are still going through violence domestically. The cops are not here to solve these issues. So what we need to focus on investing in communities and getting to the root cause of what caused crime in the first place, which does not inherently happen under neoliberal capitalism because it is not profitable. We have, and this is the last thing I'll toss to Jaybe, because we've seen the crazy showing with Luigi Maggione and the police treating, engaging in political theater with Eric Adams. And I love that they're doing this because they are making it clear that their job is to be the private militia of the capitalist class. There's a reason why instead of providing healthcare to their people, higher wages to their people, housing to their people, they instead doubling down on the police state in anticipation of people being uprising, of people being discontent with the system. So that's a big toss-up, but that's the way I can start this conversation. I would love to hear from Dr. CBS, Sabby, or anyone else in the panel. I can rant on this all day. Make sure you guys check out 10 Demands. It's something I've been passionate about. Wrote about the insane funding we get to police. There are a lot of liberals that say, "Oh, come on, man, we got to talk about reforms." Why would you want to run away from the fiscal argument? From make the fiscal conservative defend the giant police budgets, and they never can. You know what I mean? Libertarians, I got to agree with me on the fact that we spend crazy amount for police spending and white people still don't feel safe. but people want to run away from it. And we should lead with the fiscal argument. But I pass it to the panel. James, Dr. CBS.
I think I read somewhere like Bloomberg at one point said that the NYPD was the 7th largest standing army in the world. Damn. And then in budgetary terms, I think it's ranked 33rd in the world as a sort of military force. And so that should tell you something. And this is a city, right? This is not even a state. This is not a country. This is a city that is the 33rd largest in the world, right? Which says a lot about the confluence of militarism and policing, but also, to your point, the ways that force and incarceration are the ways that this country at every level, state, city, federal level, plan to respond to the increasing polarization of wealth, and the ways that people respond to, bare life and the increase in these destitute conditions. There's a lot to say about the police. As we get into the story, something that I found interesting. So I don't know if you want to start talking about it, but one of the things that I read about this police chief is that, to me, this says a lot about the state of our economy. This woman said, right, that the police chief coerced her into a sexual liaison, not for money, but for overtime. So people are so destitute. They are, I don't want to use a bad word, but they are engaging in sex for work, like not as their job, but to procure more work. That's crazy. It's like, it's not a Louis Vuitton bag, right? It's not a vacation. It is for overtime. And I think that says a lot about, and a lot about how theoretically, right, these people who work as officers should have working class solidarity, because clearly their material conditions are not great, right? Their base salary, it varies wildly throughout the country, but clearly these people should have working class solidarity because they are suffering the same conditions we are, but instead they are the shock troops for the ruling class and for private property. So, and moreover, right, this just goes to show we have the worst of the worst criminals, con men, and terrible people who are ostensibly supposed to be upholding the law, but they are doing worse than the people that they harass on a day-to-day basis. So quite interesting.
Yeah. Sabs?
I mean, when I think of the NYPD, I think of stop and frisk. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. So I've never had a good impression of the NYPD. So when I heard about this story, it really wasn't surprising. I mean, remember Eric Adams, where did he come from? Remember, he was an NYPD police officer who supported stop and frisk, by the way. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I've never heard good things from or about the NYPD.
Yep, absolutely. So let's get into this article. This came out actually out of the Orlando Sentinel. So it says, disgraced former NYPD chief home raided amid allegations of sex for overtime. Maddrey abruptly resigned and put in his retirement papers on December 20th after bombshell allegations were made. So let's get into this. So it says the NYPD's Internal Affairs Bureau and federal investigators raided the home of disgraced former NYPD Chief Department Jeffrey Maddrey Thursday as a criminal investigation into accusations he swapped sex for overtime was launched. Search warrants were also executed for other locations as the NYPD officially suspended Maddrey, and that was from Jessica Tisch. Maddrey abruptly resigned and put in his retirement papers on December 20th after bombshell allegations were made by Lieutenant Quatisha Epps. She claimed Maddrey, the highest-ranking uniformed member of the department, has sexually harassed her and forced her to perform unwanted sexual favors in return for overtime pay. Quote, at my direction, the Internal Affairs Bureau of the New York City Department is working with law enforcement authorities to investigate ourselves, essentially, against former Chief Department of Jeffrey Maddrey. Maddrey was suspended from the department this morning as law enforcement agents executed search warrants at several locations, including his residents. So that is that's Miss Tish right there. Now, it's kind of interesting. This lady here, because there's something that a lot of people don't realize. She has some very well-known connections in family as well. I'm going to share this really quick, and then because I want everybody to know that it's a big club and we're not part of it. And another thing I also want to say is if the NYPD chief is actually doing things like that, then what do you think the other ranking file officers are doing? I think we need to go into that and think about that as well. But I want to share this as well because a lot of people don't know about the Tish family. So this is the Tish family. They are worth over $10 billion, is one of America's richest families. Bob and Larry Tish acquired Lowe's Theaters in 1959 and transformed the company into insurance, hotels, energy, and packing conglomerate Lowe's Corporation. It says their descendants, including Larry's widow Wilma and 5 other billionaires from the third generation, are estimated to own nearly a third of the publicly traded company. Bob's son Jonathan and Larry's son Andrew are co-chairmen of Lowe's. Andrew's brother James is CEO. Bob acquired 50% of the New York Giants for $75 million in 1991. Jonathan sits on the board alongside his siblings Lori Tish and Steve Tish, who are executive vice president and chairman. Forbes estimated the National Football League team is now worth $6.8 billion. So this is the Tish family. So for people who are wondering who is this lady that is in the upper echelons of the NYPD, well, she got connections. So I just wanted to bring that out if in case anybody's wondering. So moving on. It says any NYPD officer who retires technically stays on the books for 30 days can be suspended if it's been determined he's violated department rules or committed a criminal act. It says that the Daily News report published in November named Epps as the highest paid member of the NYPD, ranking in $515, well above the $285,313 former Commissioner Edward Caban made in the fiscal year. And her complaint with the U.S. Equal Opportunity Commission, Epps alleged that Madry repeatedly demanded sex in exchange for her getting overtime hours. And when that lieutenant began to reject Madry's advances, he retaliated by adding her name to a much scrutinized internal list of the department's overtime earners. My question to you guys is this a great argument for defunding the police? Because to me, it's like this guy is literally committing sexual harassment on the taxpayer's dime. I want to start off with Dr. CBS. Oh, Sabby, go ahead, Sabby. You ready to go?
I was going to say exactly. That's just one example. There's many others that we can point to because our taxes do pay for it when we think about the police department. But this is what this guy is doing with his time. Like, shouldn't you be using that time to go actually try to, I don't know, solve crimes or something like that? So that's a big one. That's a good point there, Jaybe.
Yeah. Have you guys ever hear these stories and the media always talk about how the police are held accountable when there's some scumbag that's been exposed for doing something illegal for a very long time? The question that no one ever asks is why no one in the police department snitched on them before. So the question, and this is a theoretical question that America needed to come to terms with, are you a good cop if you allow a bad cop to do illegal stuff without blowing the whistle? Are you a good cop if you work under a bad cop that you refuse to hold accountable? In regarding my theme about police being gangs, in the NYPD, in the LAPD, and I'm sure it's in the NYPD, but I know I read a story specifically about LAPD. While they had an honor code where if you call any of your police officers doing something illegal, you don't report them. And it was an unspoken rule that if you ever report a police officer, your job is done. And that's why you don't have these systems of accountability. It always comes from a long investigation. Someone's being reckless and being caught after years and years of illegal actions. And that's why people need to wrap their mind around that. The police culture that we have enable gross illegal behavior, and then whenever they caught, they just use taxpayer money to pay it off.
Absolutely, Dr. CBS.
Well, I mean, I guess my question would be, what would make a good cop? If it so the cop's job is law enforcement, right? And as we know, these laws operate under states of exception. They're imposed on people who largely had no say in the laws that we have to follow, but also people who can't afford to defend themselves or who are the most vulnerable. So I don't even know exactly what a good cop is, right? One that does their job. So that's one question. I think that the second question, or the thing in terms of defunding the police, effectively what that means is that I don't think the problem with police funding is simply that it comes from taxpayers. Because if the government stopped funding police tomorrow, then we'd have Elon Musk and these private, owners of private capital funding the police. And then they're beholden to so they're already beholden to nothing. But then they really would be beholden to absolutely nothing except for effectively these, private corporations and individuals who are funding them. So I think defund perhaps is a start. In terms of a redistributive function, I suppose, if we assume that money that went to policing would be going elsewhere, that's not a given. It is not a given that if the money that goes to policing now would then automatically or objectively go to education or healthcare, the things that we want, because these malformations are baked into like the system that we currently have. And so I guess defund the police wouldn't be the banner around which I would organize. I don't knock the slogan or the, abolitionists who organize around that, but I also think I would need, I would need a more robust program for how it is that we stop the violence as well as the class warfare in which police forces are engaged.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned class warfare, because defund is the most direct version of class warfare that we can wage against the police state itself. Because how did the police state get as strong as it is now? Whenever the police was criticized by the liberal, democratic, I would about to say left, but they're not left, but the liberal class, they will lead to more reform, which led to nothing but more money being sent to trainers. The same trainers that led to the police crisis in the first place. So essentially, every time there was a police controversy, they would solve it by giving themselves more money. So what we should do, as I need to change this light bulb, but what we should do as a people under siege, our first goal, especially under a system where we can't magically change everything out of thin air, we need to decrease the power of our oppressors. So in a capitalist system where money is power, where resources is power, before we can have some sort of violent armed revolution, which is obviously a very valid means of change, what we need to do in the meantime is depower the oppressive class, which this is why I appreciate your perspective, but I'm just explaining why I am supportive of defunding, why I think it's something that we should champion, simply because it's a way that we can strip the capitalist power structure. It's a form of class warfare. But I would love to hear your thought. That was just my perspective, adding to the conversation.
Well, two things. It's not as if police are throwing wads of money at people. They're shooting them. And so even if the police got another dollar, they already have tanks, guns, and weapons. And so alongside defunding has to be some model of expropriation, I would think.
Yeah,
because defunding means don't give them any more money. And secondly, a lot of those weapons come from government grants, right? It comes from like the, excess military weaponry being funneled to these police departments. And so again, what do we mean by defund? There has to be and also, I would be fine if police walked around with no weapons. Like in many countries, they have like a fucking stick or something, a billy club. That would completely change the dynamic of policing in and of itself. Then there's a whole argument about police cars, right? And the types of policing that are manifested through, and that started in like the 1950s or something. Anyways, car culture and policing. But I think that there are different ways to
Absolutely.
to achieve the objective of policing not being a means of brutalizing, terrorizing, oppressing, and repressing a population. And so
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
have to think more about simply.
No, I think we're actually on the same side here, because if you guys, because Dr. CBS is actually asking the right questions. Like, what does it mean? Now, guys, the good news is we have 10 demands where we have an entire demand called defund the police, and we go after a specific funding mechanism, funding laws, the militarization of the police. So Dr. CBS is actually asking the right questions, that the questions that most people will ask, and we have a direction. We have funding mechanism that we can directly go after, and the militarization after the police is the number one thing that we probably should be going after. But Jaybe, Sabby, pass it to you guys.
Yeah, and so just to let everybody know, when we talk about changing policing, public safety as we know it, it is because we have stark reasons. Look at this entire screen. We're all melanated, right? We are all Black, and we all know exactly what the history of policing has done to our communities. And just to let y'all know, this actually came out, and I actually reported on this, about how the cops were literally making and selling crack cocaine in our own neighborhoods. Cops.
Yeah.
Okay. Says law enforcement cooked crack cocaine in the 7th floor of the county courthouse. This is out of the Tampa Bay Times. So when we talk about trying to rethink policing, it's because they are not safe for us.
How many, and I'll pass it right back to you, James. I apologize. But how many former drug dealers have to testify that they was working with the CIA and the CIA was selling drugs for people to believe them? I understand if people want to dismiss one crazy asshole, maybe two, but how many of these people that we need to come out and strongly discuss this? And there's a famous, I'm blanking on his name. I apologize. There's the guy who named after the fat rapper. What's the fat rapper name? That big Black guy. I'm blanking on his damn name.
Who, Rick Ross?
Anyway, yeah, Rick Ross. Thank you. There's and the guy knows specifically the guy who Rick Ross stole his identity from. The original Rick Ross testified many times that the feds was in on the game. They had meetings with feds. He knew people who had meetings with feds. Now, Rick Ross is just one guy. There's countless testimonies. Now, Jaybe, I pass it to you, because there's so many examples of the cops selling drugs, which is why when I hear people discuss policing, more specifically white suburban America, it's almost like they're living in a completely different reality. They believe that these cops are like these Captain American types that come in to save in and swoop in and during a home invasion, which never happened. They out there selling drugs too. They making all these illegal deals. They are forming gangs and militias within their own unit.
And right, in Baltimore, they were planting drugs on people. I mean, there was video footage. Remember, there was that former Baltimore cop he's been on Joe Rogan and a couple other shows. He came forward after he left the police force, and he said, like, no, he was like, they would tell us to do these things. They would tell us to go to certain communities, to go to certain, corners, to harass. And he said, one of the things I remember he said was like, people assume that in order for the police to arrest you, you have to be, you have to be doing a crime. And he said, no, that's actually not true. But he was one of the first people I saw come forward about that they were planting drugs on people in Baltimore. The police were.
Yeah. And so that goes into the next segment that we're going to be talking about, about policing and, the community. But I think it's important that we try to focus more on, public safety, why the system needs to change, and then how we can do it. Because we talk about mutual aid all the time. And one of the things that the Black Panther Party did was that they also defended the neighborhoods, not just against the police, but also against maybe nefarious people within the neighborhood that were doing things. Like, for instance, they used to walk the old people to the bank so that they can cash your Social Security checks. without it being stolen. So it's about actual safety, you know, within the communities, instead of having this state that is, you know, a holdover from, not even a holdover, I'm being very kind in saying that, from these slave catchers that it used to be. So going to keep an eye on this story as it develops. But yeah, this guy was literally trying to trade sex for overtime. Crazy story.
And as I'm a Marxist, I believe in protecting the working class. I just believe that the neoliberal capitalist class is wrong on public safety. It's not that I don't care about public safety. It's that the liberals and the conservatives are wrong. Go to a wealthy suburb, even a wealthy suburb that is mostly black, brown, or whatever. No one's gangbanging there. No one's gangbanging in the suburbs. What does that tell you? That tells you that crime is directly related to how affluent someone is, how people basic needs are met. So you look at China, for example. China has 4 times more people than us. People say China is crazy authoritarian. They have less people in prison than we do. Why is that? You know why that is? Because 90% of millennials in China own their homes. You're not gangbanging if you're a homeowner. So the answer to public safety is simple. Actually have a coherent system where you are taking care of people's basic needs.
Sabby's definitely not a gangbanger.
Well, I'm in a sorority. Them gangs. That's what I say. I quit gangbanging. And I don't know. I think that people in suburban areas commit just as many crimes. Number one, they're just not police. Number two, they live in a state of exception, but they're doing drugs. They're brutalizing people. Those are the people who are the middle managers of firms that are destabilizing the economy and that work for, like, for example, these healthcare firms that are committing major crimes against ordinary people.
That's a good point.
So, like,
I
think that, so, you know, and I don't even, so they might not be in gangs, but I think that they're committing crimes, and I think that they're fucking up our society because of the nature of the culture of our society anyway. And I just refuse to believe the working class is the most violent. When we think about the distribution of violence in this society is perpetuated by people who tend to have means. And as we know, the petty bourgeoisie is actually the class that's most amenable to fascism, which is to say that they're the most amenable to forms of extraordinary violence. So
absolutely. That's a great point. I got no counter argument. That's a great point.
I will add too, people sell drugs in the suburbs too.
Yeah.
They just aren't policed in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Or their dad is
you guys are killing me now. You guys are killing me right now. What I mean is because the mainstream consensus among the suburbanites is that we have to hyper police the poor, which is why your guys' points is great, because they do crimes and stuff too, but they believe that the hyper policing against the poor is the solution. My argument is not, but you guys bring up amazing points as well. Go ahead, Sabby and James.
All right. So if you guys have not already, go ahead and give a like for this segment. We appreciate it very much to all of you. And that moves us on. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to the people who are giving super chats right now. Thank you so very much. I also wanted to share this comment before we move on. Celeste says Marjorie was accused by the first New York City Black Police Commissioner, and Mayor Adams helped him get out of the issue and forced her out of her position. If that's true, I don't know if that's true, but allegedly, then that also means that they knew about who he was beforehand. And this just shows that it's all systemic.
Oh yeah, if you are someone who is working in law enforcement and you are sexually harassed, or if you are a victim of harassment, especially by someone from management, the absolute worst thing that you can do is go to your union, by the way, because the union will always cover for the sergeant, the person in charge, and they will get you fired. There are a lot of people who misunderstand that the role of the police union is to protect them. No, the role of the police union is to protect the brand, to protect the department, and especially the leadership, which is another example of the toxic nature of American policing in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the super chat. Janice says, since Lowe's mentioned, I find it finds a lobby to eliminate workers' comp with all these retail like Nordstrom should be boycotted by working class. Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that you have somebody as high up, in the economic ladder, like the Tish family, that's really overseeing the NYPD, it just goes to show that that's how egregious it is, because you have somebody who is, rich, that looks down upon us, from that point of view too. Thank you so very much for this, Roger. It says Cynthia Brown of the Ohio-led Coalition to End Qualified Immunity, baby. Yep, absolutely. I've had her on my channel a couple of times. She's really great, talking about ending qualified immunity, which is also part of the 10 demands that Nick and Zoya and Awkward have put together. Let me check the Rockfin side. We're good on the Rockfin side, and I think we're good on the Rumble side. So we can definitely move on to the next segment. And I think the next segment is going to be on homelessness. So the homelessness that we're going to be talking about is the homeless numbers that have actually jumped. So we're going to get into that right now, talking about the homelessness spikes in 2024. So Sabby, you actually had the story that you wanted to talk about this homeless story.
Yeah, so this is a big one that happened over the holidays. We've talked about the homelessness crisis, I think, multiple times over and over again on RBN. But this one in particular, I think really got a lot of eyeballs. So I do want to show people this. And I think the first place a lot of us saw it was on Twitter, and it was just kind of making the rounds. But this was the story that dropped. The U.S. homelessness is up 18% as affordable housing remains out of reach for many people. So that's 18% for this year. It goes on to say the U.S. saw an increase. So let me make this a little bit larger. It goes on to say that the U.S. saw an 18.1% increase in homelessness this year, a dramatic rise driven mostly by a lack of affordable housing, as well as devastating natural disasters and a surge of migrants in several parts of the country, federal officials said on Friday. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development said federally required tallies taken across the country in January and found that more than 770,000 people were counted as homeless, a number that misses some people and does not include those staying with friends or family because they do not have a place of their own. So that part there, I think, is really important. That 770,000 people, that doesn't include those that are staying with like a friend or a family member. A lot of times people think homeless and they think of people that are sleeping on the street. Unhoused doesn't just mean you're sleeping on the street. Unhoused people are also people that may be sleeping on someone's couch. So just think about that. And it goes on to say that increase comes on top of a 12% increase in 2023, which HUD blamed on soaring rents and the end of pandemic assistance. The 2023 increase also was driven by people experiencing homelessness for the first time. The numbers overall represent 23 of every 10,000 people in the U.S., with Black people being overrepresented among the homelessness population. And this is the part that I really want to zone in on here, right? So, and Nick has talked about this on the show before. When we talk about like the homelessness population, you have to remember Black people, like 40% of the homelessness population. So these numbers that are increasing, that also disproportionately is going to affect Black Americans in this country. I told you earlier this year that there was a surge of unemployment for Black Americans in this country. And a lot of people didn't want to talk about this. Politicians were telling you that the Democratic Party just needed to message better. The Biden administration told you that the job market was doing great, but they totally omitted, and this is on purpose, that there was a surge increase of unemployment, in particular for Black people. Now, add that to this story about the homelessness increase. These are things that people need to know. This system that we have right now currently is not sustainable. We cannot continue to have rents that are $2,500, $3,000 a month. Like, we have gotten to the point where rent for an apartment in some of these cities is a mortgage. And it should have never been that way, but that's where we are. So this problem is continuing to get worse regardless of who is in the White House. This has increased over time. So I want to pass this to the panel to get your takes on this as well. I'll go to Dr. CBS first.
Well, I think it's mutually reinforcing, right? Because if you lose your home, you're likely to lose your job. And if you do not have a home, it's actually impossible to get a job without an address. This also relates to the previous story we were talking about, because we know the ways that having a felony or a criminal record, even having arrests in some cases, can bar one from getting employment, as well as public housing assistance. And so I would like to know the breakdown of Black homelessness, because I would hypothesize that actually Black men are more overrepresented in the version of homelessness that's not couch surfing, right? Because of mass incarceration and its after effects, because of the ways that they tend to be barred from the types of public housing assistance that come with having that mothers, right, can be considered for. And just anecdotally, that day to day, that is what I tend to see. Like, I live in Detroit. And so when I look at the houseless population, it's by and large males. And so that's something that needs to be, I think the gender dynamics are very important. I would glean that those who are couch surfing, staying with relatives, maybe even living in cars, might be more, women and non-men. I think the other thing too is, I'm sure that alongside houselessness is the inability to afford other types of necessities like food. So these are the effects of inflation, exorbitant rents, and jobs whose wages have not matched the pace of inflation and the increased cost of living for decades. And so, because there is a population of working houseless people, folks who have jobs, who have full-time jobs, who then go on to live in their cars. So this is the case in places like Seattle, Los Angeles, New York, because even though they have a paying job, they cannot afford rents. And so all of these things are mutually constitutive. And I do agree that it's untenable, right? That something has to give. But, as socialists, it's not inevitable that what will come will be socialist, because fascism is a populist movement too. And quite often, because of the nature of this country and the sort of momentum of this society, that might be, we say socialism or barbarism. I don't know. It's looking real barbaric right now. So we'll see.
This is also why, too, you see a lot of people, more so nowadays, people that are even, it used to be, what did they used to say? That, when you're in your early 20s, you'll have roommates. And then by the time you're your late 20s or early 30s, you'll, either have your own place or you'll be buying a home or whatever. Not so much the case anymore. I mean, there are people that have no choice. Like, this is what I've noticed more and more. People need roommates, but they need more roommates and for a longer period of time. And a lot of that has to do with expensive rent. There's also another thing that you brought up, and I want to pass it to Jaybe, what it's like to get an apartment. And a lot of places you have to pass a credit check. And over here, I don't know how it is everywhere else, but over here in Massachusetts, you have to pay 3 months rent up front.
Yep.
So all these things kind of go together. Jaybe?
Yeah, so that's one of the variables. A lot of times, because I know what it's like to be homeless. So when it comes to being homeless, like, first of all, you have to be able to pass a credit check, right? Let's say you're trying to get a house and you have a friend that you're also trying to get a house with, right? So you guys apply together. First of all, you have to have an application fee, which application fees are north of $40 per person. So you have to do the application fee. Then after you get the application fee done, they have to do a credit check. And even if you may pass the credit check, if your friend doesn't pass the credit check, then you both are disqualified, right? Another thing that a lot of people don't think about is if you are homeless and if you lose your ID, your driver's license, your birth certificate, or your social security card, that sets you back months on top of it, because you cannot get a job without an address. You cannot get a job without an ID. You cannot get a job without a social security card. You cannot get a job without some type of form of ID, right? So that also sets people back, right? And then people go, well, just go to a shelter. No. Because the thing is that shelters also place a lot of different barriers in front of people. What if you're not religious? Or what if you are against organized religion? But a lot of these shelters are very hyper-religious, and then they will force you to worship their God in the way that they worship it, just so that you can be able to have a bed to sleep in at night. On top of that, if you are a man and you have a family, you as a man cannot be with your family in the shelter. You have to go to the men's shelter. So you have to separate from your family. And I said this, a lot of people look at me crazy when I said this, but when we were little, yes, I know what it's like to be a homeless child. And my brother was 11 or 12, and they would try to force him to go to the men's shelter by himself, because he was between the ages of 12 and 13, and leave my mom, me, and my other brother. And that's not right. But the thing is, that's how the system is set up. So there's so many different barriers. Some of them don't even allow people to actually smoke a cigarette. So these are some of the barriers that it comes with to housing, on top of the issues where being in poverty actually affects you mentally to the point where it messes you up. And a lot of people don't talk about the diseases of despair that happen to people. And I know that we all pretty much do mutual aid. What is the one demographic that we always see when we're doing mutual aid? I can tell you right now. Black men.
Yep.
People that look like me. And typically, I'm not trying to delineate too much, but a lot of the Black men are typically Black American men who are freedmen.
Yep.
And so that's the system that we live in. But yeah, so that's some of the difficulties. That's some of the difficulties. I didn't just describe all the difficulties that are associated with being unhoused as well. And then on top of that, you got hotels and motels where people are sleeping in those. And then those people are also homeless. And yes, I've seen little kids getting picked up on the bus at these motels and hotels. Okay. So, yeah.
I was just going to add to the part that you were talking about with the homeless shelters. They also have a curfew. So let's say you do get a job. Let's say, okay, the homeless shelter, that's your address. Let's say you do get a job. Then you can't have a job where you work at night. So if like you wanted to wait tables, which are one of the easier jobs to get, then you have to tell them I can't work in the evening. So that's going to be a problem for the restaurant because that's usually their busier time. So there's that. There's the curfew. Some shelters don't take children. So if you're a parent and it's you and your child and you need a place for like the night or a week, what are you going to, you may not be able to go to certain shelters. Some of those shelters, you have to be clean. Like you can't have any type of addiction, no substance abuse, like that type of thing as well. Like there's a lot of things that go along with that people just don't talk about when they say, well, just go stay at a homeless shelter. The motel families, which I've seen a lot. Like I remember when I was in undergrad and I was waiting tables, there were people who worked with me that lived at motels. Like whole families that lived at motels because they couldn't afford that. They were trying to save up to get an apartment. But like I said, when you need 3 months up front, what are you supposed to do? But there are families that are living at motels. What do you guys think happened to some of those families that lost their homes during the 2008 housing crisis? Some of them had to go stay in motels, I should say.
Just one thing I want to add too is that they also discriminate against disabled people too. So, because a lot of times they want you to be able to do certain work and stuff like that within the missions or within the shelters. And if you're disabled, to them, you are more of a headache. And so therefore, they don't want to have you there as well. So that's another thing that they do. I wanted to share something really quick, but Nick, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, this is the housing situation was one that radicalized me probably the quickest that in war, and this is why I organized. Like Casey Tennis was one of the first people I organized with, and I have done many events with them. People don't realize that and this is how Casey Tennis described it. There's been damn near ethnic cleansing of Black people from major cities because Black mayors as teammates. I can speak of Quentin Lucas in Kansas City in particular. Someone who was running and pretended to be progressive, but then as soon as he took office, he started doing the bidding of landlords and real estate development companies, which drove up the rent for many Black families and drove them out of the cities. So Kansas City was at one point around 35% Black. It is dropping and it's decreasing. And we have seen this trend across the entirety of the country. And I know people get tired of me talking about other countries, but when you look at the homelessness, and you're not seeing massive homelessness in Moscow. You're not seeing it in Iran. You're not seeing it in China. You're not seeing it in North Korea. You know, the country we're supposed to hate. They give housing to their people. So we're living in a completely incoherent system where we are the wealthiest nation in the world. But despite that, we have millions of homeless, which is why I go directly at the problem itself, which is the problem of capitalism. Because you want to know why there's so much Black homelessness for all the liberals who are obsessed with identity politics? It's because of Black landlords. I had a Black landlord who was a piece of shit. Black landlords in the Black capitalist class lead to Black homelessness, the same way the Black capitalist class exploit Black labor. So unless we directly challenge the power of the landlords and the real estate class, which had completely taken over Washington, like many others, there's not going to be any kind of small reform. This is something that only revolution can solve. In China, for example, they have strong restrictions on land ownership. You can't own more than 2 units. And if you own those units, you're not allowed to rent out for people for profit. And people in America are like, oh, that's authoritarianism. We have to bring the true authoritarians to heel, which is the capitalist class, which led to a housing crisis. That's all I have. Go ahead, Sabby, or panel.
I was just gonna say it's a lot of different things altogether. And then something else I noticed too. So this also came my way, which I think you guys might get a kick out of this one. And I don't think this is a permanent response, a permanent answer to this problem. But this is something that is happening. These tiny
houses.
How did you know I was good? How did you know?
I just knew it. Because it's like, come on, man. You basically having people live in these sheds. And that's and it's inhuman. Like the conditions are inhuman. Anyway, go ahead.
The little tiny homes, right? So they're doing these this came my way. Arnold Schwarzenegger donated $250,000 to build 25 tiny homes intended for homeless vets in LA. I want to just show, let me come back out for a second. Let me make sure I'm sharing the sound. Sorry. But I wanted to show this to people because I was like, okay, so I just, to me, in my opinion, I don't know. Like, I get it, but I just don't feel like this is the permanent answer.
No.
I'm gonna show you inside one of these right now.
Arnold Schwarzenegger gets it.
Let me pop out a little bit.
Tour of a series of tiny homes he bought for homeless veterans and their animals who once lived in tents on the streets. Former governor delivering.
I don't know why it does this with Twitter sometimes, you guys, but I'll just leave it like that.
Just days before Christmas.
I mean, that's got to feel so fulfilling, though, knowing that you're able to make this happen for them.
I'm ecstatic. I'm really ecstatic. I'm so excited. To me, this is the greatest Christmas gift.
Schwarzenegger donating 25 new units.
This is what the tiny home looks like. You've got a bed, you've got space. This isn't occupied yet, but it's going to make life a lot easier for one of these vets.
It's been a lifesaver for me.
Veteran Bruce Henry Cooper personally thanking Schwarzenegger.
He has not forgotten us.
This scene, a lot different than this.
It's not right.
In early October, we joined the secretary of the VA as he toured this campus in West LA. He discovered a long row of tents on the public street with some vets who'd been camping there for years.
Is there a place to put some of these people so they're not literally outside here, but on the property?
Well, I think you see some of it right here.
Soon after that, action. We were here in November as Governor Newsom toured the property and announced an expansion of the tiny homes program. Former Governor Schwarzenegger saw that and decided to spend $250,000 of his own money to buy even more tiny homes.
We brought everyone together, and there was no one that said it can't be done.
At home, Ferris Kearns spent months living on the streets. Talk about the difference between being in a tent and being in a tiny home.
No squirrels and no rats.
Rob Reynolds of AmVets advocated to make this happen. What kind of difference does the tiny home make?
They have electricity, they have heating and air conditioning.
It's especially important on a rainy day like this one.
It proves the point that they're going through not just sunshine.
Schwarzenegger, joined by his son Patrick. They both provide food to the vets.
We owe everything to our veterans. You know, they've sacrificed their lives, their familyhood, their futures for us and for our freedom.
It makes me feel good that they continuously can give something back to this country that means everything to me.
So my whole thing is, I mean, I get it that he's trying to help, but I worry about this whole idea of tiny homes as a solution. There's a class issue here as well. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger has like mansions. And then these guys, these are veterans. Why are veterans homeless? Number one, because the VA in this country have failed them. And I've seen that in person. But two, it's just, this should not even exist in a country as wealthy as the US. This is ridiculous. And it's like, oh, here's a shed, go live in a shed. What are we doing?
Sabs, that pissed me off. That pissed me the fuck off. Because here's my thing. You mean to tell me that you have a millionaire with multiple homes and they decide to give sheds to veterans when there's 16 million vacant homes in this country? Sheds? And then, like, you know what, one of the greatest, one of the worst phrases I've ever heard was, beggars can't be choosers. I hate that phrase. Because they shouldn't have to beg in the first place. And two, they're human beings, so yes, they should be given a choice. It does not make any damn sense, the fact that these guys have to live in these sheds when you literally have houses that are vacant close by where you could just put them in there. This government, this system does not give a damn about them. And then on top of it, part of the RBN Orlando chapter, one of the members works with the VA and was telling me that a lot of veterans, they have to register in order to be in the VA. They're not automatically put in.
Right.
And then on top of that, they're getting kicked away as soon as their tour ends. As soon as their military service ends, they're tossed aside. And so now we're just going to be putting them in sheds like their lawn equipment? Is that what we're doing now? Because that doesn't make no damn sense to me. And so the thing is like we're taking human dignity and we're dropping it. We're lowering the floor, the standard of human dignity, that, oh, you deserve a shed instead of a home. And so people, oh my God, this is so great. That's poverty porn. That's what that was. And so people do not fall for that. Now, somebody, makes a decent salary, but they just want to live in a tiny house because of, on their own, fine. But no, you give people the option of having something that is actually worth their dignity. And the thing is like throwing crumbs at people, saying, oh, this is better than nothing. This is what they tell us every single time. This is why people are fighting to change this system. And I'm being very, very careful with what I say, but I really want to go off even further. But go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, I think it's also a reflection of like the individualist and alienated ethics of the society, because instead of building collective homes, right? Collective housing that multiple people with different size families can live in. The solution is these hyper individualized homes because they're for individuals, right? And I guess they're pet. So there's also a way that it's a reflection of not having real responsibility to one another or any type of collective or cooperative consciousness, because the solution is to have people even more separated in these tiny units, right? So it's not even like, you know, housing projects where larger buildings that at least theoretically have, you know, parks and basketball courts and some sense of a public commons, whereas this is just kind of, yeah, these glorified sheds. So yeah, I'm gonna leave my veteran comment to myself, but yeah, so it's all bad, and it's so 25 tiny homes for $250,000. You mean to tell me that costs $10,000? And then my other question would be like, how long are their utilities covered? And it's like, how are the utilities function? Is it a generator? Like, do they just get the home and then they're responsible for utilities? Because they say they have heat and electricity, but is that built into, you know what I mean? So there's other like literal costs, especially in LA. And so I wonder how all of that is working, if it's just like a one-time donation. And why would it cost $10,000? I get, you know, I'm not in construction, but that seems exorbitant. It reminds me of when the Clintons went to Haiti and built like 8 homes with that Red Cross money. Something is afoot.
Nick?
I got nothing on that, Jaybe. I think we can move on to the next topic. Check your audio, Jaybe.
Oops, sorry, I'm trying to be responsible. But thank you so very much for all that. Everybody go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you so very much for that one right there. Let's go into some of the chats. I'm going to check to see if we have any Rumble rants on Rumble, and see if we have anything on Rockfin. So it looks like no Rumble rants on Rumble. It looks like we're good on the Rockfin side, which is great. Let's go into the YouTube chats as well. So we have here the next one. We have Andrew coming in saying the system uses the credit system and a debt to socially oppress people individually. Have debt. In some cases, even your partner doesn't want that added stress and could decide to break things off. That is true.
Yeah, people they still spread the lie about social credit scores in China, as we have literal credit scores in the United States, which is way more nefarious. Like, even if you are dumb and you believe in social credit scores in China, the credit scores that we have in the United States is clearly worse. I sold cars, guys. It's the biggest scam of all time. You want to know what the credit score system is? If you're poor, you pay more money. If you're rich, you pay less money. That's it. And that's if you're allowed to have a car or rent a place. It's the biggest scam that ever exists. In the same way that capitalist realism infects people's mind, in the same way that credit scores. People believe that credit scores has always been a thing. Credit scores was here 2 years before I was born. I think it started in like 89. That shit wasn't even here when boomers was going around. But people talk about it as if it's inevitable, as if something that always had to be part of our system. It was part of the beginning of the downfall. Just one part of the equation, right? Go ahead, JB.
Absolutely. Also, a big shout out and thank you to Official People's Party USA for becoming a channel member. Clap it up for Official People's Party. Thank you so very much for joining and supporting the channel. Literally trying to keep the lights on up in here. We don't want no blackouts. The only blackouts we black out is corporate propaganda. All right. So let's get into our final segment. We're going to be getting into, this is going to be a really interesting one that we're going to be talking about. This happened yesterday. We're going to be talking about an attack that happened in New Orleans. My goodness, what in the world happened? So let's get into it right now. So Dr. CBS, you were just in New Orleans over the last few days. And so number one, we're glad you're okay. But what was your first thoughts about this story as it had happened?
Yeah, so I was there from the 25th to the 31st. I actually left like during the day, so I wasn't there for New Year's Eve. And I actually had been on Bourbon Street a couple days before that. It was downpouring rain. It was crazy. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Now, and so a bunch of people have been texting me about, are you okay? Are you okay? And I was like, what is going on? So one of my friends who I went to New Orleans with sent me the story about this, which turned out to be a U.S. Army veteran who drove a pickup truck into a crowd, killing at least 15 people, getting to a shootout with a couple of officers, and then also, I guess, was killed on the scene. His name, he came from Texas, apparently. His name is Shamsuddin Jabbar. And it later came out that he was a member, or I get either first it was saying he was a member of ISIS, then it said he was sympathetic to ISIS, and there was an ISIS flag attached to the vehicle that he drove through the crowd, and that he had posted on social media that he was sympathetic to the group, and that initially he was planning to kill his family, but then he wanted to kick off a war between believers and non-believers. I have many questions. Oh, and then simultaneously, there was a Cybertruck that exploded in Las Vegas, and they're trying to see if the two are connected. So there was, in the New Orleans case, there were homemade explosives that were found, 2 around where the attack happened, and then 1 in his car. And then in the Vegas case, that car sort of was detonated by homemade explosives. And so they were trying to see if these 2 cases were connected. It feels, I don't know. I'm not gonna lie. When I first heard about the story, I thought it was white supremacists. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like that, before like the story unfolded, I was like, this sounds like some Charlottesville. Because first of all, it's like, why New Orleans, right? And so it seems to me that New Orleans gives credence to like a racially motivated attack. It's 2025. This is when Trump is coming into office. And so that was what first came to mind. But there's just a lot of this that doesn't make sense. And, the last thing I'll say, it's like this, they're saying like this person is motivated by ISIS, but he's a former military vet. It seems to me that he's also motivated by U.S. militarism, right? Which is the ultimate, shows the ultimate disrespect for human life and the ultimate purveyor of violence. So I don't know that attack can be divorced from U.S. militarism and the fact that he is a U.S. military veteran. So I don't know what others think about this.
I'm not a, well, I don't really think I'm a conspiracy theorist. I just notice things. We notice things, and our track record is pretty good. Our track record is pretty good in terms of noticing things that are very off about stories. So you want to tell me that this guy went to the same military base that the previous terrorist attacker went to as well? I'm gonna read this tweet. Hotspot has been all over this. Big shout out to our friends on Hotspot covering this. Matt Levisberger, seen wearing a Slava Ukrainian shirt in his photo, served at Fort Bragg, the same military base that anti-Trump fanatic and Ukraine military recruiter Ryan Root visited over 100 times. And then you have this guy that was a veteran in New Orleans. So what's up with all these United States veterans being radicalized in order to produce domestic terrorism? My questioning hat comes on in this moment, because now they're saying this guy was influenced by ISIS. I thought Donald Trump destroyed ISIS. Isn't it funny how ISIS is always conveniently destroyed when United States politicians need them for elections, and then right when our state need to manufacture consent for increased police state spending, and when they need to justify their endless conflict overseas, all of a sudden ISIS comes back. And quick question, guys, where do you get ISIS flag at? Go to eBay. Go to Amazon. Can you find ISIS flag, my friends? So I am not a conspiracy theorist. I just notice stuff. It's always the same thing. These people are always well-armed, well-connected, have this plan. They got flags that ordinary people can't get access to, and they always have some sort of military ties.
Mm-hmm. And then they die. They get blown up by a robot, or they get shot down, or these shootouts, and so they never live to tell the story. It's very interesting, very peculiar.
And Joe Biden wants us to know, and he's very stern on this fact that Joe Biden is here to assure us that there is zero connection between the New Orleans driver and the Cybertruck bomber. So there's so many coincidences. What does it say that the president of the United States is now coming out here and saying, "Hey, come on, guys, stop! Don't question the narrative. Don't question." And you already seeing a ton of these people on Twitter. And here's the one I responded to. Here's Eric Stallwell. The only sane response to the terrorist attack in New Orleans is to mourn the victims, thank the cops who didn't stop it, by the way. 3, support the efforts to hunt down anyone involved. And 4, ask your government how we stop the next attack. If you're saying much else, you are probably too online. And now after that tweet, I just said, no doubt in my mind that it's a conspiracy, because you notice how the ruling class want us to stop thinking and questioning things. Guys, I'm not saying I'm right. These are just theories. How does the scientific method works? You ask questions, you probe, you find evidence. That is what we should be doing at all these events. And the official narrative that they are selling us is nonsense. There is nothing wrong, and they want to shame people for being conspiracy theorists. There is nothing wrong, and I said this many times on the channel, at looking at information that the establishment gives you and telling them, I don't believe you. The narrative doesn't make sense. And then forming your own hypothesis from there. But I can rant on this all day. I can't wait to talk about this with Post Duopoly Show tomorrow. I definitely will be covering this, but I'll pass it back to the panel for your guys' thoughts, because this story is very interesting to me. Go ahead. I
was just gonna say, when I first read about this story, this one and the explosion of the Tesla truck outside the Trump Tower, that was my first initial thought was, were these guys military? That was my first thought, right? Because again, like, you have to have access to the explosive, et cetera. It's easier to get that if you're a member of military, like that type of thing. But the other thing too that I thought was interesting is that, to Nick's point about the ISIS flag, doesn't it just seem a little too it's packaged a little too neat, like
too on the nose, like, come on.
And within 24 hours.
So I was sharing my meme here. Isn't it funny how the FBI always have these people on their radar? But the ISIS, the second, and I'm very open-minded. I don't immediately jump to conspiracy theories, guys. I promise you I don't. But the second I heard that this guy had an ISIS flag, nope, bullshit. Not buying this for a goddamn second. But Jaybe, Sabby, Dr. CBS, anything you guys want to add? I think this is a funny meme. I think this was being spread. I don't know the truth, but that's our job, guys. I'm not saying y'all know. I'm just presenting theories. I'm just telling you how they operate. I think it's very important for us to push back against how the ruling class program people into thinking, you're bad because you believe in conspiracy. Oh, you don't believe the official narratives. Our job is to be scientists. Scientists ask questions, they are wrong, and then they ask another question. They don't blindly accept shit, and that's what I do. If there's a story that doesn't make sense, I'm going to ask questions. That's what I implore my audience to do. But James, Sabby, Dr. CBS, I don't want to rant too much long. Anything else you guys want to add? I have another story to cover if you guys need me to. I don't know how you guys, if you guys need me to do a story, I got one. But go ahead, guys.
I was just going to add something else about this too. Just remember, guys, that the New Orleans event took place New Year's Eve, and then the Tesla truck explosion was literally within 24 hours. I'm just saying, like, these two literally within 24 hours. To Nick's point, both of these guys, at Fort Bragg is one of the largest bases in the world, but both of them coming from there. And then another thing in particular, so they just released another statement from the Las Vegas Police Department, who they are now not fully, I guess, ready to confirm that is the guy. They said they can't say with 100% that the body that they discovered is the guy that is being labeled as the suspect. I guess they just don't feel comfortable doing that just yet. But the other thing about it was they said that now that they've had time, I guess, to look more at the information, there was a gunshot to the head before the explosion. They just released that before we went live.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, there's literally nothing about this story that passes the smell test for me. I'm sorry, not a single damn thing. They're getting extremely brazen. Sorry, go ahead, Sabby. Go ahead.
This is going to be the U.S. government's excuse as to ramp up surveillance, to ramp up the police state, and to increase wars in the Middle East.
Absolutely. I think this one they want to sell the war with Iran. They got to sell it to the anti-war Trump people who are expecting an anti-war administration. We think they're foolish for thinking that, but there are people who think that they voted for Trump for anti-war. So how do you win them over? You gotta fucking false flag the shit out of them. You gotta scare. Oh, Iran is doing all this stuff and trying to win them over. But I think Dr. CBS, I think you wanted to chime in. I saw you on mute. Do you want?
I'm just, and he's a Black Muslim. I don't think that is nothing, right? Because anyway, in this current in the sort of Palestine uprising moment, it's Palestinians, Arab and Muslim folks, and Black folks who have been the primary targets of a lot of police and state repression, especially on campuses. And so I don't think it is happenstance it's very interesting that this is a Black Muslim person. And I know some of y'all on the left don't like to talk about race, but these things matter. Like if you think about those who are being targeted by anti-organizing legislation, those who have been targeted by anti-campus organizing practices, it's racialized people by and large, or those people become the faces of it. And so I don't think that is, or it's just very interesting. If in fact this is a psyop, again, it's like it's a little bit on the nose.
Yeah, and Dr. CBS, to your point, and this is another reason why I'm extremely skeptical, and I'm questioning the narrative, because I'm showing just one tweet. There are countless tweets like this. This is clearly designed to get people to side with Zionists, to side with the United States empire on cracking down against the Islamist, Palestinian ISIS threat. Even though Hamas and ISIS hates each other, but they still connected. But Americans, they don't have to try. I'll read this tweet. I'm only reading to you guys. I never cover Tomi Lahren. She's not important. I'm telling you, this is the messaging coming from the right. They are going to use this story to crack down on free speech. The anti-Semitism psyop is coming. I told you guys on the Tuesday live stream that my story of 2025, I told everyone to watch for this. In 2025, we're going to see the biggest crackdown on free speech in modern times. You had Trump that already said he's going to team up with Chuck Schumer. He's going to team up with Mike Johnson in order to pass his combating anti-Semitism bill, which will be one of the most effective. I would say one of the most, because there's been a lot of them. There have been a lot of free speech crackdowns, but I would say there will be one of the most effective in sweeping free speech crackdowns. And they're doing all these false flags. They're organizing all these terrorist attacks using the military members in order to justify that to the population. Look, I'll read the tweet. I'll read it for the people only listening. Look, this from Tomi Lahren, the right wing. If you're in our streets waving Palestinian or ISIS flags and chanting an intifada revolution, you should probably be on the watch list and deported immediately. See, she calling for Americans to be put on watch list. That's what they're calling for. So this is what the end game is, especially when Trump is coming in. Trump is kind of crazy, is a wild card. So the establishment need to do something to whip him and his people in line. Well, I think Trump would be very willing to do this, but they need psyops in order to drive the population and their mouthpiece like Tomi Lahren. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying.
That's a good point, Nick, because that's the thing. Like, think about it, guys. Who benefits from this happening?
Absolutely. I can tell you more tweets.
That question, like, who benefits from this happening? Remember, Israel has lost control of the narrative. Their reputation has been destroyed across the world. Who has something to gain from this happening? That's just something to think about.
What we have to point out is that the Biden administration threw up the lob. Now the Trump administration is just going to dunk it in, because that already what has passed the House, I don't think it passed the Senate, but was the nonprofit organization bill, whereby anybody who was pro-Palestine would be charged as charged as terrorists, right? There's already the crackdown on campuses. There's already all of this anti-radical legislation has already been passed and has already been circulated under a so-called Democratic presidency. And just last year, the year before that, was the hit piece in the New York Times about peace protesters ostensibly being funded by China. So from the People's Forum to Code Pink and et cetera. This is under a Biden administration.
Yep.
And so this is a bipartisan duopolistic project. It's not just, there's nothing uniquely sinister or repressive about Trump, because the architecture has already been unfolding over, well, for decades, but within this particular administration, they've already laid the groundwork for Trump to just codify everything when he has control of both houses, as well as the judiciary and the executive branch. So
yeah, that's a great point. That's the ratchet effect when they use a Republican administration to crack it forward, and the Democrats, they take everything the Republicans do and they double down on it. Then as the liberals fucking are having Trump derangement syndrome, they completely ignoring everything the Democrats are doing. Now, here's another tweet to show you guys what the obvious op is. And I'm seeing these tweets. I'm seeing the story about the ISIS flag. This is why I immediately call bullshit, guys. So now this is the narrative. I don't know who the other guy is, but he said, what we witnessed today in New Orleans is a daily occurrence in Israel. When people say that Israel is the first line of defense for the West, this is what they mean. And Bill Ackman says, totally true. We share a common enemy. You guys see what they're going with this? So when you are crafting a theory, you need a motive. There's a clear motive here for them to do this. And this is my funny jib, and I'll pass it back to the panel. I was just showing this tweet to emphasize me and Sabby's point. I've mentioned, how can we share a common enemy if ISIS never attacks Israel? Mm-hmm. They're not an enemy of Zionists. They always conveniently pop up. So they always conveniently pop up right when Israel needs them the most. So I can show you guys those tweets all day, but I will be covering the story a lot over the next few days. So I will say that for later. Jaybe, Sabby, what you guys thought? What you guys want to add?
Just one thing. For all the people who say that ISIS and Hamas or the Palestinian resistance are the same, that's like saying socialists and fascists are one and the same. It doesn't make any sense.
Which they do say, that is where the term authoritarianism came from, or excuse me, totalitarianism came from in the 1930s, was how the state linked Hitler and Stalin, or linked fascism and communism at that particular moment. And so that is there's a long history of making that linkage. And this is just the contemporary manifestation.
Yeah. Even though it was the socialists and communists in Soviet Russia that were largely the ones who defeated the fascists. But they don't want to connect those two dots. Yeah. So if there's anything else, we can finish this segment up. Anybody, any other last thoughts?
I'm good.
All right. So go ahead, everybody. Go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you so very much. Let's go quickly to some of the comments in the chat. And then I know, Sabby, you have a hard out at 6:30, so we'll get straight to you. So thank you very much on Rothman for the tips on Rothman. Roger, he says, I got a slew of 8 citizen ballot initiative amendments to reverse homelessness. 1, to run for public financing of citizen ballot initiatives with a guaranteed absolute minimum of $1,000 to $1,500 weekly before public matching funds kick in. That allow petitioners to hire the homeless to gather signatures. Also, I don't like the pandering to vets. Every time I hear homeless vets, I say, what about the homeless who are not vets? Leave they ass out on the street. This is why
you guys haven't heard my rant about veterans. My rant about veterans is one of the reasons why YouTube killed our channel.
See, that's why I said I'm gonna keep my veterans thing to myself, because I am anti-war, I am anti-imperialist, and so it's a job. They signed up for that job like everybody else. Shit. Like, do we want the pigs to get special treatment? Like, come on, bro. To the extent that they're homeless, they should be taken care of. But the special category of veteran, I think I agree. Like, all homeless people should have homes.
Yeah, very well said.
He continues, says, perhaps this is why the CIA is advertising on YouTube, teaching a master class. Looks like they are short of competent recruits, not to mention the recruiting centers that we call colleges are emptying out since Gen Z is now skipping college and opting for the vocational trades deemed the tool belt generation. Where else can you go to find Zoomers but online? I know y'all saw my post. I said to CIA ad hilarious. Thank you so very much for that, Roger. Let me check to see if we have any Rumble rants. I don't think we do, but it's always good to check just to see if we have that. Looks like we're good on the Rumble side. We don't have any Rumble rants. So let's go into the YouTube side. All right. So we have from this, Chris C says, people naturally conspire, especially if we're in a state of deceit, which is done in the open. How can anyone not draw up theory, especially if it's based on real facts? I share Nick's position. Thank y'all as always.
How can anyone study history and not be a conspiracy theorist immediately? The history of humanity is the history of people conspiring together. Like the history of governments is the history of the ruling class conspiring to lie to the peasants. Study Rome. They lied to people all the time about what wars were fought over. The most consistent thing in human history is the government lying to the populace. So how can anyone study history in any sort of analytical way and not be a conspiracy theorist? It's once I studied history and I learned how evil the ruling class could be, I started questioning shit. Cause I'm like, bro, if they doing evil stuff like Vietnam before, they doing all this stuff before, what are they doing right now? So everyone, and if you, I don't even think it's like, it's not even like conspiracy theories. It's just simple scientific method of questioning things, proposing theories, asking questions. That should be normal. But anti-intellectualism in this country is so rampant. People think it's a sin to question stuff. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But go ahead, James. We can continue.
So yeah, Sabby. So what do you have going on your channel tonight before you head out?
Yeah, so I have a panel tonight with Ron Paclone, Yvette Carnell, Pamela Denise, and Zeneb about the H-1B visa discussion, along with the worker exploitation with that. So I have a panel first, and then I have 3 news stories.
All right, that's going to be a really interesting one because, yeah. Sabs, it's going to be a really good one. You're going to be live at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, correct?
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much for good seeing you, Sabs, and have a great show. All right. Take care, Sabs. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go to the last ones, and then we'll head on out. So thank you very much to Old Crow for being a member for 11 months. Clap it up for Old Crow. Thank you so very much for being a channel member, as well as for this very generous super chat. Old Crow says, Happy New Year, RBN, starting off the year with a global Mossad theater.
I was about to say earlier, they're emboldened, man, especially with the Luigi Maggioni shit. They're emboldened to tell people bullshit that doesn't make sense. Like, they arrested this dude named Luigi Maggioni that looks nothing like the guy they originally showed us. And he had, just so happen to have all the evidence on him that they need. Come on. Like, they get so emboldened with this nonsense. That's why I at least want to get our audience to think. You know what I mean? That's the best we can do. At least get our people to think. Because I'm glad that people around us are not like these drones that just believe nonsense that they're telling you. But go ahead, Jaybe.
Yeah. We got one more here from Andrew says, because Trump administration is foreshadowing a free speech crackdown on Monday, January 20th, people should be attending the real Donald Trump with live streams of burning flags.
Yep. I can't wait to that because that's been a tension. It wasn't worth reporting, but I have been following the tension between like the libertarians and the MAGA wing, and the libertarians always was upset that Trump opposed flag burning, and that's something that he says he's going to do since day one. So I told these libertarians and these people who like, oh, I don't agree with Trump, I'm going to vote for him. How are you going to hold him accountable? He's not running for re-election, boo-boo. So he's going to do whatever he wants, including passing a ban on flag burning, passing anti-Semitism bills, approving the H-1B1 visas. He's going to do everything that pisses you off because you have no mechanism to hold him accountable. As I warned you guys. Go ahead, Jaybe.
All right. So with that being said, we got all the super chats done. And one of the things that I would like to ask is, Dr. CBS, what do you have coming up, and also how can people find you as well?
Hey, so I have a podcast with my co-host Layla Brown called Life Study Revolution. We will be back for our third season in mid-January. So there's that. I'm on social media, but who cares? Look up the Black Alliance for Peace, which is the organization to which I belong, and Community Movement Builders. Those are both great organizations if you're looking for one. And my book came out in 2023, Black Scare, Red Scare, Theorizing Capitalist Racism in the United States. Currently working on a second book about mutual comradeship. I write for different public venues like Grassroots Thinking, sometimes Black Agenda Report, even less for Hood Hot Communists, but sometimes. So anyway, check out all that and organize.
All right. Thank you so very much for that. And so with that being said, if anybody would like to, you guys can also contribute to our patrons on Patreon. Thank you so very much. And we are going to be heading on out. Any last words, Nick?
We got Play Through Opera show tomorrow, so looking forward to that. I got a lot I want to cover. You have obviously all of this theory. We're going to talk about that in great detail. You have the energy war. Like I got a hot spot I'm gonna make about this. You have Ukraine that officially I think Jaybe disconnected. Ukraine preventing energy flow going to Europe. So now, like, Europe is 100% okay with sacrificing the quality of life of their people. It's for an unwinnable war. So we'll be covering that. Post-duopoly is always fun. Our prediction for the new year, our thoughts on the incoming Trump administration. So there'll be a lot to check out. Make sure you guys follow Dr. CBS. It's always great to have you on. It's always great to have someone that's on our same wavelength. You know, I mean, there's some people, I love talking to people with different political persuasions, but there's some people you got kind of like, how radical are you? Let me test them out. It's great to have Dr. CBS on here. So make sure you guys check them out. I will just sign us off, Jaybe. Any last things you want to say before we sign
All right. So we're going to thank the patrons on our way out. Thank you guys so very much for joining us and this beautiful stream. And so I just hope that we get to have you back on with Dr. CBS. Thank you so much for joining us. And you guys have yourself a beautiful day. We're going to do the patron shout out right now, and we're heading on out. So make sure I get, because for some reason I had a little bit of a glitch there, but yes, we are good to go. All right, everybody. You guys have yourself a good one. Love, peace. Catch your fingers. Take care. Have a wonderful night.